places like that we started flying into, I had never been to Hawaii. I thought that I would have to marry a millionaire to ever get to Hawaii. I ended up flying to Hawaii until I was blue in the face. It was beautiful over there. Okinawa was beautiful. Wake Island was only about 7 miles long and a mile wide, and it was very different. But at all of these places, we'd end up going to the beaches. We would have layovers there, we'd have fun.
But it was really sad leaving Honolulu. Everybody was in better shape, but sad and crying. I mean, the guys would come on crying because they were leaving their wives and girlfriends. And the others going back from R&R, like Hong Kong, were just, I don't think they even felt anything except sick, but, and the apprehension of going back into that. And now they knew what they were going back to. So that was hard, and they just sort of, very quiet, you know, they didn't really want to think about it, I think.
In regards to what happened with us being brought down by the Russian MiGs in 1968, there were 3 seaboard airplanes in Seattle, and we were all taking off pretty much at the same time. So we're all flying over there, and the next thing we know, we're looking out and there is a Russian MiG on the side of our airplane, and there is a Russian MiG on the other side of our airplane. And what we didn't know is that there was one behind us also. But you could see them, you could see the pilot, you could see him signaling for us to go down. Our pilot, where they wanted us to land was very short, and we were in a DC-8 at the time. So he tried to circle around, and they threw a car sweep in front of us telling us that we needed to go down. So we did, and we taxied up to where they wanted us to. We were now at a Russian MiG base. And then they came on the airplane, and they insisted that all of the window shades be pulled down and the back door closed, and it was very hot over there. They came in and they took away all the passports. We didn't have electricity. They set up machine guns around the airplane to surround us. They took away the flight crew, and then they started where they would bring us 3 times a day little round cans of cheese and a drink that tasted like a combination of coffee and tea and dish soap. And it was terrible. And of course, we had run out of food. You know, we had to have people start going off the airplane to go to the bathroom because we had to lock off all the bathrooms after a while. And then we went back to the airplane and they were going to let us go by this time. So, but then they had the problem is they had nothing to start our engines with. So we actually literally, everybody got off of the airplane and they had to push the airplane back so that it could turn around to head out. And they gave us JP4 fuel, which was for their fighters. So we weren't sure how that was going to work with our airplane. And then they actually made us take off with the front door open. And I'm closing the door as we are rolling down the runway to take off because they insisted that the door be open until we were taxiing out. Why, I have no idea, but that's what they did. And then we landed in, we did not land directly in Tokyo. I think we went to Misao, and they had tons of people out there to come and check on the fuel. They brought us American cigarettes, donuts, coffee, and once they checked everything and the fuel was okay and everything else, then we again took off and landed in Tokyo.
The flight crew on the ground had about an hour or 2, sometimes 3, and the pilots always disappeared. They went, we never knew where. So, and we were to stay with the aircraft, which we did most of the time. And I remember especially going up into the cockpit and cutting our hair. It was so hot. We did that. But we sometimes were able to get a ride in a Jeep at Cambron Bay to go out and look at the beautiful crescent-shaped beach adjacent to that airstrip, which was always a joy to see that. It was such a contrast to the war zone of the airstrip.
I remember the Guam layovers a lot, and Philippines sometimes, but it was mostly Guam. And it was just this little bunky, and we had 2 cars for the whole crew, which was like 4 flight attendants and 3 pilots. They had an engineer at the time. So we had 2 cars, so you had to always plan to go to eat, go to the beach, and it was a shift, so you had to find somebody that knew how to shift. And so I always remember that, because when I had a car and I learned to shift, and I had heard that you never know when you're going to need to do that. So, but that was the big thing, is to plan. And sometimes, the pilots just went off, and then we'd have to 4 of us figure out where we want to go to eat or be at the beach, or they had the base there, and you could go over and get drinks for 25 cents, and they had these Mongolian barbecues and for hardly anything. And so then you mingled. That's where I think a lot of flight attendants met their spouses to be, because you were socializing then. But a lot of them were the officers, because it was the officers' club.
Was there anything that the crews did together that made it a little easier? Well, I learned how to drink. I have to tell you that at all the layovers, and because you are together for so long, that you'd go to the hotel, you'd go to your room, and you'd get back together again. And you would go out for cocktails and go out to dinner together, and you spent a lot of time together. And then a lot of times, especially starting with Saturn, when you got home, you got together with crew members also, and their families. So you knew the wives of the cockpit crew members, and they knew who your family was and things like that. But when we were flying in and out of Vietnam, it was mostly on our layovers we would get together. And a lot of us lived in the same areas.